This weekend marks a significant event at Lakewood Church, as a new generation is stepping into the spotlight. On both Saturday and Sunday, Jonathan Osteen delivered a sermon at son's services. Joel Osteen and Victoria Osteen are his parents. The events that unfold when the offspring of a world-renowned preacher begin to doubt his father's vision for Lakewood Church. When Jonathan Osteen started to question long-established beliefs about faith, riches, and obedience, it surprised everyone. A family dispute and a church-wide schism ensued from what had begun as a sermon. Even if things are heating up behind closed doors, one question is making the rounds. Is Jonathan bringing light to the truth or shattering a tradition? When the world began to crumble around them, it was as if something had changed within Lakewood Church. As soon as Jonathan Osteen left the stage, the message that had been anticipated as another uplifting one transformed into something completely unexpected. Instead of the typical words of encouragement and solace, his remarks were heavy, pointed, disturbing, and thought-provoking. First, everyone was trying to take in the news. While some remained motionless, clutching their Bibles close, others silently exchanged perplexed looks. Some even silently departed, as if they required some space from the recent discourse. Reason being, this was no ordinary sermon. Something was cracking under the surface, like a change had occurred. That change was also noticed within the enormous walls of Lakewood Church. In the background, Joel Osteen was told right away what had transpired. The congregation's reaction was everything but neutral. It was split. A ministry founded on the principles of unity, hope, and prosperity was rocked by Jonathan's message. There was a delay in Joel's public response. Rather, he disappeared inside his office, leaving everyone else to ponder. He had spent years crafting a message that would go on to motivate countless people. Now, though, his own son, the person closest to him, was posing the unexpected challenge. Since this wasn't merely an argument, that further complicated matters. Legacy was the theme. Later that night, in an intimate discussion, the father and son faced one another. Immediate, heavy, unsaid, and unavoidable tension pervaded the room. In an effort to decipher Jonathan's motivations for speaking in a manner that clearly undermined the core of their church's message, Joel questioned his motives. However, Jonathan remained steadfast. And yet, he remained unwavering. Over time, he said, faith had become something lacking, one that ignored spiritual depth, perseverance, and sacrifice in favor of material prosperity and ease. The original significance of the message had slipped Jonathan's mind. He cited biblical examples of the early Christians who, instead of enjoying perpetual affluence, underwent hardship. In his view, his message did not constitute rebellion. The error was rectified. But Joel had a different take on it. Jonathan, in his view, wasn't only challenging established doctrines. He was jeopardizing the foundation of an international ministry upon which the hope of millions rested. Every aspect might be modified by just modifying the message. Plus, they weren't both ready to completely retreat. Another figure subtly felt the weight of the discussion as it intensified. Sophia Hahn, who is married to Jonathan. Earlier, she had been observing the reaction as it happened in real time from the audience. As they returned home, she witnessed the bewilderment, unease, and mounting tension. That evening, she made an effort to speak softly to Jonathan, not to quiet him but to show him the repercussions of his actions. She jogged his memory that there was a whole congregation following his every move, not just him, his wife and children, but also his father's legacy. However, Jonathan's resolve remained unwavering. It probably just got harder. Retracting his message would, in his mind, compromise the truth, thus he refused to do it. That didn't seem like a possibility to him. Distracted by conflicting emotions, Sophia froze for an instant. She beheld both his unwavering conviction and the impending tempest that engulfed him. At the same time, a more significant event was starting to take place within Lakewood Church. Clutches were lowered by leaders. Worries replaced casual discussion. A sense of urgency grew out of concern. Simply put, what Jonathan said remained. The question that no one was prepared to address was now facing the church as it spread. Did we just misunderstand one another, or was this the first sign of an irreparable break? Jonathan Osteen would return to the pulpit the following Sunday with a message that would further escalate the situation, putting a father in a tough spot. As soon as Sunday church started, everything changed at Lakewood Church. The air was cold and devoid of the normal optimism and friendliness. On the contrary, the whole congregation seemed hesitant, as if they were all still reeling from the events of the previous week. Returning to the pulpit was Jonathan Osteen. Even more so than previously, the hush that surrounded him was oppressive this time. The room was staring at him in a different way now, while he remained calmly standing. Not only because he was the son of a pastor, but also because his remarks were starting to change the course of the whole church. As was his wont at Lakewood, he began with tried and true topics like faith, kindness, and giving. Things seemed to be returning to normal for an instant. However, that sensation was short-lived. His tone gradually changed. A fundamental institution closely associated with the church's identity, giving was Jonathan's first topic of discussion. But instead of bolstering it, he began to doubt its long-held interpretations. He questioned the notion that giving ought to be connected to anticipation, that it must never to feel like a trade between faith and benefits. Sincerity, not the expectation of reciprocation, is what ought to motivate genuine charity, in his view. And with that, the mood shifted. Concerned that they might not be understanding him, onlookers glanced around. A few of them stood motionless, while others started to clearly move around in their chairs. A few rose from their seat and silently left, clearly overwhelmed by the sound. For the simple reason that this was no longer only an alternative reading. It seemed like a direct assault on long-held ideas, and it was permeating the room in real time. Even outside the confines of the church, the response was starting to heat up by the time the sermon concluded. Within hours, clips of Jonathan's speech began to circulate online. Debate erupted on social media. Others lauded him for fearlessly addressing what they perceived as unsettling realities, describing him as brave, invigorating, and fearless in challenging conventional wisdom. However, other people saw something quite different. They said he had disgraced the legacy his father had established, thrown a worldwide congregation for a loop, and publicly crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The church has evolved into more than simply a house of worship. At this very second, it had sparked a national dialogue. The anxiety intensified even more when no one was around. Urgent discussions arose within Lakewood's leadership. Now that worry had set in, pressure had set in. Feeling compelled to react, maintain narrative control, and safeguard the church's stability. Jonathan was growing too prominent to ignore, according to certain leaders. Some others were worried that taking drastic measures might lead to even more divisiveness. However, one reality was becoming increasingly hard to ignore. Things had spiraled out of control. Involvement in the battle grew for even Joel Osteen. This time, it's as a parent seeing his son thrust into the limelight amid mounting scandal, on top of his role as a church leader attempting to shield the congregation. It felt like every turn was off. The choices we made had repercussions. Even at home, the stress was seeping within. It was also detectable to Sophia Hahn. The tension, the stillness, the burden of an argument that was rapidly becoming more than just that, a point of no return. But Jonathan didn't back down. No matter the consequences, he was adamant that his message had to be heard. However, he was unaware that the upcoming gathering at Lakewood Church would not merely consist of a conversation. It was going to be a turning point, and after it happened, there would be irreversible ramifications. Tensions within the Ian family spilled out of the church during the intense Osteen family feud. After they got home, it trailed behind. Preaching, reactions, and the ever-increasing controversy transformed what had been a private family connection into one that was subject to public scrutiny. In the middle of it all was Jonathan Osteen, who would not budge from his unwavering belief in the truth. Furthermore, Joel Osteen ended up in a situation he had not bargained for. As a father seeing his kid grow into the most contentious member of his own church, and as a pastor attempting to save a worldwide mission. Their conversations always seemed to weigh more than the previous one. During their private conversations, there were no heated debates. The stress was under control. The type where each word was meaningful. Joel made an effort to see things from Jonathan's point of view, but he also couldn't turn a blind eye to the increasing effect on the congregation. Someone seems to come up to me at least once a week and mention that they remember when I was just this tall.